Boldness isn't loud, it isn't reckless, and it's not about swagger or attitude. The boldest men aren't the ones making the most noise. They're the ones who are crystal clear about what they want. That clarity is what makes their presence powerful and their words effective. Because before you can ever ask a woman for what you want, you need to ask yourself, what is it that I'm truly seeking? See, most men walk into conversations with women unsure of their own desires. They mask it with vague intentions, hoping the woman will somehow read their mind, fill in the blanks, or make the first move. But uncertainty is the enemy of boldness. You cannot communicate powerfully if your message is foggy. Women are incredibly intuitive when it comes to sensing emotional congruence. When your mouth says one thing but your energy is saying something else, she knows. She may not be able to explain it, but she'll feel the disconnect, and that subtle dissonance will kill attraction before it even begins. Clarity, on the other hand, creates safety. It communicates stability. It tells her that you're not guessing your way through life, that you've done the inner work to understand yourself. That's incredibly attractive, because a man who knows what he wants is a man who's done the hardest part, confronting his own truth. Maybe what you want is a relationship. Maybe it's connection without commitment. Maybe it's something sensual, emotional, or spiritual. There's no shame in your desire, as long as you own it with honesty and self-respect. But if you try to get what you want while pretending to want something else, you're not being bold. You're being manipulative. And that never ends well. You have to understand that clarity is not just about your words. It's the foundation of your presence. When you're clear, you speak more simply. You don't oversell or explain too much. You don't try to win someone over. You state, you express, you invite, and then you allow the other person to respond. That's confidence, and it begins with being honest with yourself. But clarity also requires you to face your fears. Because sometimes we do know what we want, but we're afraid to admit it. We fear being judged, misunderstood, or rejected. So we shrink our truth, hoping to be accepted in a smaller form. But what we don't realize is that by hiding our full desire, we also hide our full power. And boldness can't live in hiding. So the first step to asking for what you want from a woman and actually getting it is knowing, without apology, what that want really is. Not what sounds good, not what you think she wants to hear, but the truth that lives in your gut. That's where your boldness is born. Because once you're clear, everything else becomes simple. When you know exactly what you want, you stop speaking to be accepted and start speaking to be understood. That shift changes everything. Most men have been conditioned to believe that in order to get what they want from a woman, they have to perform. They think they need to play a role, project a persona, be someone slightly more polished, more charming, more strategic than they really are. But here's the truth: the boldest way to ask for what you want isn't to impress. It's to be honest, direct, unfiltered, but respectful. And that kind of boldness can't be faked. It comes from being deeply rooted in your identity. When a man drops the performance, he shifts from seeking approval to expressing truth. He stops trying to say what he thinks will work, and instead says what's real. That kind of directness doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from alignment. It comes from a place of emotional maturity. The understanding that you don't need to manipulate your way into connection. You simply need to show up, grounded in who you are, and speak without hiding behind rehearsed lines or calculated charm. Women can tell when a man is posturing, when he's subtly angling for attention or validation, when his compliments are coded in expectation. It creates an emotional dissonance, even if his words are smooth. She might smile politely. She might play along, but underneath, she doesn't feel safe. Why? Because she doesn't trust what's being said. When a man isn't being fully himself, it triggers a deeper instinct. What's he hiding? But when you strip away the performance, something powerful happens. You become still, clear. direct. There's no need to impress because you're not trying to earn her interest. You're offering your truth and allowing her to decide if she resonates with it. That alone shifts the dynamic. It creates space for authenticity. And in that space, real attraction can grow. This is especially important when asking for something meaningful. Whether it's clarity in a relationship, intimacy, commitment, or even space. The boldness doesn't lie in the ask. It lies in the way you ask. Without fear, without games, without needing the outcome to define your worth. Because when your self-respect is intact, you no longer beg for what you want. You state it, and that subtle shift changes everything. This doesn't mean being cold or insensitive. Being direct isn't being dismissive. It's being clean with your energy. It means removing the guesswork, the double meanings, the emotional smoke screens. And when you communicate like that, you invite a woman to do the same. You create a dialogue that's clear, honest, and grounded in mutual respect. So ask yourself, are you being real when you speak to her? Or are you performing a version of yourself you think will be accepted? Because if your voice isn't rooted in truth, it's already lost its power before the words leave your mouth. Being bold isn't just about having the courage to ask for what you want. It's about how you ask. And one of the most powerful ways to amplify your boldness is by pairing it with something that's often misunderstood: respect. When boldness is anchored in respect, it stops being threatening and starts being magnetic. It makes a woman feel seen, not cornered. Desired, not dominated. Safe, not manipulated. You see, there's a myth, especially among men who are trying to level up, socially or romantically, that assertiveness means being aggressive. That the louder you speak, the more dominant you appear, the more likely you are to get what you want. But the truth is, real assertiveness, the kind that creates trust and connection, doesn't need volume. It doesn't need pressure. It needs clarity paired with emotional intelligence. And that emotional intelligence starts with respect. When you're respectfully assertive, you're not begging for permission, nor are you steamrolling someone else's boundaries. You're standing firm in your own. You're saying, this is what I want. This is what I feel. And I'm not ashamed to voice it. But you're also communicating just as clearly, I respect your autonomy. I'm not here to force anything. I'm here to express my truth. And I trust you to express yours. That kind of communication builds immediate trust. Why? Because it removes hidden agendas. Women are constantly bombarded by indirect or manipulative attempts to extract attention, affection, or validation. So when a man speaks with straightforward intention, but balances that with genuine respect, he stands out. He doesn't just seem confident, he feels safe. And safety is what allows attraction to deepen. The psychological core of this dynamic is about boundaries. Not just hers, but yours. Respectful assertiveness means you're not trying to shape, shift, or negotiate yourself into being liked. You're not diluting your truth to be palatable. But you're also not using your truth as a weapon. You're presenting it with calm self-possession, no apology, no arrogance, just presence. And this is where many men get it wrong. They think boldness requires them to be emotionally hard, to speak without care, to just say it, no matter how it lands. But boldness without empathy becomes insensitivity, and empathy without courage becomes passivity. The sweet spot is where the two meet. That's where powerful, masculine communication lives. So if you want to ask for what you want and actually receive it, remember this: a woman is far more likely to give her trust, her attention, and even her desire to a man who makes her feel safe in the presence of his truth. When your boldness feels grounded and your intent feels clean, she's not left guessing your motives. She can relax into the space you create, and from there, respond openly. You can say all the right things. You can rehearse the perfect sentence, deliver it with composure, and still walk away wondering why it didn't land, why she didn't respond, why it felt like something got lost in translation. And often, it's because we forget this truth. What you say matters far less than what you signal. Non-verbal communication is the invisible foundation of boldness. It's your energy before your words, your presence before your pitch. And when a woman is deciding whether or not to trust what you're saying, whether or not to take you seriously, she's watching your entire being. Your eye contact, your posture, the stillness or restlessness in your body. She's listening for consistency between your tone and your words, and she's feeling for congruence between your message and your state. If you're saying, "I want you," but your body is tense, your voice unsure, your energy scattered, she won't feel it. And in truth, you don't fully feel it either. Because the boldest communication doesn't happen from the neck up. It doesn't come from intellectual cleverness. It comes from alignment. When your body, tone, breath, and intention are synchronized, you create what can only be described as magnetic presence. This is why some men say less, but get more. They don't over-explain. They don't chase or try too hard. Their presence says everything. And that quiet strength communicates volumes, without a single word. When a man is rooted in his body and calm in his energy, he becomes impossible to ignore. Not because he's trying to dominate a space, but because he owns it. He owns his desire, his truth, and that's the other piece, silence. Most men fear it. They rush to fill gaps in conversation, thinking it will make things less awkward. But silence, when used with confidence, is powerful. It gives weight to your words. It gives the other person time to feel, not just hear. And in those pauses, so much gets communicated. Trust, strength, patience. When you ask a woman for something, her attention, her openness, her time, don't just rely on your voice. Let your presence carry the message. And presence isn't something you fake. It's something you cultivate. It comes from doing the inner work, from learning to sit in discomfort without flinching, from breathing through your own insecurity instead of hiding it behind words. When you do that, when you become a man who speaks not only with his mouth, but with his energy, women respond. Because now, you're not just speaking to be heard, you're creating an emotional experience, one she can trust, one she can feel. So the next time you think about asking for what you want, don't just rehearse the line. Live it. Align with it. Let your whole being carry it. Rejection is one of the most misunderstood parts of boldness. So many men are afraid to ask for what they want, not because they don't know how, and not even because they don't feel worthy, but because they fear the no. They fear the silence, the dismissal, that tiny moment where something they hoped for doesn't materialize. But here's the truth: rejection isn't the end of boldness. It's part of it. It's not failure. It's feedback. When you begin to understand this, everything shifts. You stop seeing rejection as a personal insult and start recognizing it as a reflection of fit, compatibility, timing, energy. Sometimes the answer is no, because the connection isn't right, or the timing is off, or the other person simply doesn't feel the same. That's not a verdict on your value. It's a signpost, it's data. And a bold man doesn't collapse under rejection. He reads it, learns from it, and moves forward with even more clarity. Think about it. If you never risk hearing no, you're never truly asking for what you want. You're only asking for what you think will be accepted. That's not boldness. That's self-preservation dressed up as communication. True boldness means standing in your truth regardless of the outcome. It's trusting that your needs and desires are valid, even when they're not fulfilled. And here's the irony. The men who fear rejection the most often end up getting the worst version of it. Why? Because their energy carries hesitation. Women can sense when a man is asking from a place of insecurity, when he's putting out a feeler instead of expressing a grounded desire. That kind of request feels needy. It feels uncertain, and uncertainty rarely invites connection. But when you can ask for something, clearly, calmly, without emotional dependence on the answer, you create a completely different atmosphere. You're no longer asking to be approved. You're simply expressing your reality. And that's powerful, because it puts you in alignment with your own integrity. You're not chasing outcomes. You're living in truth. And truth, even when it's not reciprocated, commands respect. In fact, some of the deepest growth you'll ever experience will come from rejection. Because it strips away illusion. It reveals where your expectations were misplaced. It forces you to detach your worth from the result. And in that detachment, you become free. Free to ask, free to receive, free to walk away. That's the essence of boldness. Not just having the courage to ask, but the strength to accept any answer with grace. So if you want to ask boldly and actually get what you're seeking, paradoxically, you have to become comfortable with not getting it. Because when you no longer fear rejection, you stop filtering yourself. And the right people, the ones who resonate with your truth, will feel that difference immediately. There's one final element to asking boldly that most men overlook. Not because it's hidden, but because it's deeply internal. And that is alignment between your ask and your action. In other words, what you ask for from a woman must be reflected in how you carry yourself. If your request doesn't match your energy, your behavior, or your life, it won't resonate. It won't land. Because people don't just listen to what you say. They tune into who you are while saying it. This is where a lot of bold attempts fall apart. A man may ask for honesty, but he avoids difficult truths himself. He might ask for intimacy, but keep his own heart guarded. He might even ask for commitment while his life remains in disarray, unstable, unfocused, or unavailable. And in those moments, the ask becomes hollow. Not because the desire is wrong, but because it's not backed by the integrity of real congruence. A woman doesn't just respond to boldness in words. She responds to the wholeness of the man who's speaking them. And wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean having everything figured out. It means being rooted in who you are and walking in alignment with what you say. That creates trust. That creates safety. That creates a foundation where a bold request is not a gamble. It's an invitation she can feel is real. So when you ask for something, whether it's affection, commitment, or even clarity, ask yourself first, does my life reflect what I'm asking for? Have I become the kind of person who can hold what I'm asking to receive? That level of self-awareness is rare. It takes maturity. It takes humility. But it's also magnetic, because it shows a woman that your desire isn't coming from lack. It's coming from overflow, from grounded, stable confidence. That's what makes your words believable. You see, boldness without self-alignment can come off as performance. But boldness from alignment becomes presence. And presence is unmistakable. It makes people lean in without quite knowing why. They sense the truth in your posture, the clarity in your tone, the stillness behind your confidence. They sense that you're not just asking from the mouth. You're asking from the man you've become. And that distinction changes everything. So don't just focus on the question you want to ask. Focus on the foundation beneath it. Build the life, the habits, the mindset that support that ask. Become a match to the level of connection, depth, or intimacy you seek. Because the more aligned you are, the less convincing you'll need to do. You'll find that boldness doesn't even require force. It becomes natural. It flows. It feels like truth. And here's the final reflection. When your words match your walk, when your desire aligns with your identity, boldness stops being something you practice. It becomes something you are. That's the boldest ask of all, the one rooted in the man you've already chosen to become.